All
Awesome.
right. Welcome back, guys. My next guest. So we always ask our guests to fill out 3 to 5 fun facts behind the scenes. And this one went above and beyond. And I even had to trim them down. So we could do a whole podcast about our fun facts, but I trimmed it down. So she convinced a group of middle-aged women to do choreography dance for a spring showcase. So these are 45 to 65-year-old women. They ended up performing in front of an international judge and got a near perfect score, which means you were an amazing dancer. She was an avid viewer of the WWF wrestling in the 90s and used to take notes during the Royal Rumble to predict who would win. Side note, I don't know if you realized, but it was all fake. But she created her own algorithm, which was kind of funny. There's a life-size poster of her in the UCLA Student Union. She was a bearwear model at the University of UCLA. She used to hand out petty cash at MTV networks until there was a robbery, and that's how she got into ad sales. She's been to 43 countries and speaks 4 languages. CEO, co-founder of Advertible Inc. Priti Ohri. Good to see you. I messed the name up, didn't I? The
No,
last name.
you said it perfectly. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Great to see you. So I reached out, we randomly reached out. I'm a big fan of Campaign 40 over 40. And you were this year's 2025 honoree, one of the honorees. So again, very grateful for you reaching out and saying you'd be on the podcast. And then I dove into your career and I was just like, oh, she is going to be a blast to speak with. So yeah, very honored to have you and congrats on that very prestigious award as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here.
So we're gonna go through your fun facts because this is wild. So I don't even know where to start here. Um, so the choreography. So obviously you were in dance in the studio, but give our listeners a little bit more about that. That's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. When I started out on this entrepreneurial adventure, I realized that the day and the night and everything you can do and every which way you could be in your head was something I needed to solve for. And I started dancing and I joined a Zumba class at a dance studio. And this dance studio is like hardcore professional. So my teacher competes and she wins lots of awards in New York and Connecticut and all over. And so they have a spring showcase where they enable all of the dancers to get judged so that they can practice and get feedback. Well, I said, why don't we do a Zumba one? And they were like, this is unheard of. This is not like a real professional dance. And I was like, but it could be fun. And she's like, oh, it could be marketing for the class. And so we did it the first year as like a let's see if it gets traction. And it was so popular that the next year we actually had our own showcase set of classes for the song Apete.
Ah,
And yeah, we had a group of 10 women, mostly above the age of 50. I think I was the 45-year-old. And yeah, we did not realize there was a judge there. And when the judging scores came back, I think we got a 95. So we did pretty well.
wait, that's amazing. Because there were probably people that had been practicing, had danced their entire lives, and they came up and probably y'all still beat them. That's wild.
Well, because we had fun.
Yeah, exactly, which is a part of it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through each one of them, but we're obviously going to go through your time at MTV. So I want you to share that in a bit. But so I didn't burst your bubble here that WWF is fake, right? Like you knew
I think I
this.
eventually figured that out. And, RIP Hulk Hogan, he was one of the
Oh yeah.
greats. But
Yes.
it was, I was kind of this like middle child amongst a big set of cousins.
Mhm.
So the older ones were all girls and the younger ones were all boys. And I kind of sat right in the middle. And my dad always wanted a boy. So he would go and get the pay per view wrestling and invite
I
all of
love
my
it.
guy cousins over. They would be, jumping around on the couch, hitting each other in the head with pillows. And I was sitting nicely on the floor, the nerdy student that I was, with a notepad, making a bracket, trying to figure out, who's going to win and who's going to lose. I did eventually figure out it was all entertainment, but it was fun and it gave, it now gives my cousins a really good story to tell about me. So I realized that it's entertaining for everyone.
Well, and it's also fitting with we're going to talk about your career journey, but it was also fitting to where you are today, which is, working in the
Yeah.
data space. You just didn't realize it.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. All right, last one. Coachella is the coolest thing on earth. Evidently, I've never been before. Evidently, when you went, it wasn't cool either. But share a little bit more. You worked for the USDA during your time in high school for a summer job.
Yes. So when I was in high school, the most coveted job was to get this summer program in the summer program with the United States Department of Agriculture because they paid the most.
Mhm.
And essentially, what we did is we worked with scientists to evaluate the level of salt or saline in the earth. And the way we did that is by taking samples and then weighing and drawing and evaluating how the samples were growing. So one day we actually had to go out to Coachella. This was way before it was cool. And we had to go at 5:30 in the morning because it was so hot, and we had to wear 5 layers of clothes. So this is already like child abuse, I think. But we basically had to go into this grass that was taller than me so we could cut samples. And no one really thought about this, but there were a ton of mosquitoes in that grass. And so I came home and I was covered head to toe in mosquito bites. And so I think the admin at the office was really nervous that I was going to sue them. And so she was like, "Why don't you take the next 2 days off and we're still going to pay you?" I was like, "Cool,
Perfect.
free days." I didn't know any different.
I love that. So, what was that? Just kind of like a high school thing where it was? You said it was the highest paying job. What? So you're growing up, you had a massive family. We were talking offline, first generation, which I love. I was sharing one of my best friends growing up in elementary school. Is from Pakistan, but growing up in such a massive family, did you kind of find your way through high school, like what you were passionate about, or was it kind of dad, having his daughter that or son that he didn't have type thing, or what was it? Was there a passion to kick off your high school going into college?
I think I just wanted the highest grades possible. So I was all like AP and international baccalaureate and you kind of find the pockets. I went to a really large high school. I think our graduating class was 600 students.
Oh wow,
Yeah, so it was pretty massive, and there was a big Hispanic population where I grew up. So everyone thought I was actually Mexican. Um, and when I was nominated for homecoming from the Asian Student Union, and everyone was like, "You can't represent Asian people." I'm like, "Where do you think India is, people?" But yeah, it was interesting. So you find these pockets of people that you relate to, so you can figure out who you are, right? Like it's your early adolescent discovery period is high school. So I was in band, and I was in newspaper, and or not newspaper, I was in yearbook, and I did all of the AP IB classes. And so those were like my cohort was super tight. There was like 30 of us who kind of did all the overlapping activities. And so my goal was just to have fun, get the highest grades. And when I was applying for college, it was like, where's my best friend applying? And what's close enough to home but far enough away where I don't have to come home every day. And so UCLA was an hour and a half away, and it was a perfect place to go.
I love that, and it's so key. So I have our listeners know, but I have 13-year-old triplets, and we talk about it all the time. Like surround yourself with the right people and they'll continue to motivate you, whether it's in sports or later in your career. Like aspire to be something. And I enjoy that about your early adolescence. It was like, all right, I'm going to hang around with all the smart kids and I'm going to be one of the smart kids and do everything that I possibly can.
Yeah.
So your time at UCLA, was there a pivotal point where you kind of focused? Because your career journey is kind of, I don't want to say all over the place, but the early days you're kind of a bit, retail, then you jump over to retail some more, and then you jump over into the luxury line, and then where you are today. But was there a moment in college? Was it a course or was it a moment in time that you were just like, all right,
I think career wise, I've always wanted to have sort of breadth of an experience, and so it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to. I tried an internship in finance, and I tried a bunch of things that I was like, this feels a little boring. And I knew I wanted more of a cross functional view. And so my first job out of college, and it was a combination. I graduated during a recession. And so there weren't a ton of jobs. But at that time, there were a lot of these leadership development programs. And so I ended up in one of the leadership development programs for Target. And that was primarily driven by the fact that I knew I wanted to have more of a holistic experience. And unfortunately, the program wasn't exactly as I had hoped, which is what took me to the next job. But I think knowing that from the get go, that I like to have exposure across different teams and understanding how all of the different pieces of a business impact each other was really important to me.
So then you go to the complete opposite universe, which which this is how old I know I am,
Yeah.
obviously 40 over 40. So I know around about where you are, but explain to our listeners what MTV is.
Yeah.
And it's
So
not
music television. So a friend of mine was working in accounting at MTV, and she was like, "This is a great place to be. You'd have a lot of fun." I was 23 years old at the time, and it's a media company, so it's owned by Viacom. So Viacom is the parent company, and under that umbrella are a ton of different television networks. So that where I live worked particularly was MTV Networks, and that housed MTV, VH1, BET, Nick at Night, Nickelodeon, TV Land, Spike TV. So there was a whole
literally
bunch
our
of different.
childhood.
Yeah, it was basically, before there was targeting on digital, it was ad networks or television networks essentially were, hey, we're the mom network. You can reach moms if you advertise with us. Or we are the 18 to 34 demographic. Advertise with us and you'll reach the young, cool kids, whatever it was at that time. So, yeah, I worked at MTV and I started in the accounting department. And as you read earlier, I handed out petty cash. So I worked with the production folks. They would come over. I literally sat in a room that had a vault, and I would go in. They'd come to me within some sort of a request, and I would go in. I would count out thousands of dollars in cash. It was mostly to pay parking tickets and to tip people and valets and things like that. It was nothing like crazy, but I would hand out thousands of dollars of cash, and then close my window, and someone else would come and they'd ring the doorbell, and I'd open up the door. And, in doing this, I actually met people from across the company. And that's how I learned about ad sales, because I would see that they were the people who were taking out a bunch of money. They were also the ones bringing in all the money for the company. And so that's when I was like, oh, what's this ad sales thing? And that's how I started talking to the folks up there and understanding what they do, and getting an interest in that.
Yeah, I'm old enough as well where we used to have to like tape our receipts for expenses
Yes.
to where
Yes.
I felt so bad early days of my career of selling and taking clients out. I would feel so bad. I'm like, the people on the second floor are like, what does this guy do for a living? Like these receipts are like $700, $2,000. Like when you go to Vegas, you go to LA, like I want that job. And I just remember early in my career, I'm like, I feel so awful. Like these poor people are like running expense checks while I'm just like blowing cash. Obviously, on the backside, you're making the company millions of dollars, but definitely I have empathy for you. So were you a part of the robbery or
No, it
the
was it was
juicy here?
it was an inside job. I'll
Ah,
I'll, I'll leave it at that. It was not me, but I do know who did it, and I was like, I have to hightail it out of here as soon as possible. Thankfully, I had already interviewed for a position in ad sales,
mhm.
and they were like, "Cool, we'll take you whenever you're ready to come up here." So
Oh,
I made it up
beautiful.
to the fifth floor.
Yeah, unscathed. Love that. Did you and so you spent 3 years in ad sales. So clearly you enjoyed it. You were in the heyday. I was laughing because it's crazy that you and I are old enough, and we're not old at all, but
Yeah,
we're old enough to know where like there was segmentation in TV, and that was like at our time, especially early in your day in your career, like that was massive. It was like
yeah.
Food Network. Like if you could advertise on Food Network for your latest greatest or your recipe, like you were prime time.
Yeah.
And now here we are in this digital ecosystem where it's like, God, who would ever advertise that way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the funniest part was the fact that we had to use fax machines
Yes,
to
that too.
yeah, to get the orders through. But it was wild because depending on who you would have the same advertisers across all the different teams. And it was like, what are you selling them? And so I covered actually Nick at Night in TV land. And so we had moms. And so we would create like influencer content before it was that. So we would create content that was, a home and garden roadblock that was for the spring, like spring gardening for moms or something.
Mhm.
And it would be like before Bewitched and after Gilligan's Island or whatever it
Yeah.
was. But yeah, it was wild to see how far we've come. And during that time, I would say we had two digital planners for 50 TV planners and
Wow.
assistants. Yeah. So that's how nascent digital was. And at that time, we're like, oh, this is a fad.
Mhm.
This is not going to last. Like, keep your job in TV. You're going to be good.
So you then pivot. Obviously, you went back to school to get your MBA. So you have an internship on retail merchandise and planning at Coach,
Yep.
which good for you. For you go from Coach to LVMH, which clearly sets where you are in the fashionista world. So touch on that a bit. That short time, that experience
Yeah.
while you were getting your MBA, but more importantly, what was the learning that you saw? And obviously, two very historical retail, high fashion companies.
So I think having been exposed to advertising at such large networks kind of piqued an interest in like, why are customers even engaging with advertising? Like, what is motivating a person? How does a brand take advantage of that? How do they interact with it? And I really was interested in understanding the consumer standpoint. And so the 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 job at Coach was really around understanding the planning and buying cycles of actual products.
Mhm.
So not advertising, but how many scarves do we invest in for next year? How many hats should we produce? And it was primarily for the outlets in the United States. So it was at that time their largest revenue generating arm of the company was the outlets. So if that says anything about you, it
Wow.
says anything about Coach, it's that they use their main brand and their main stores to draw in the customers, and then the customers actually shopped at the outlets. That was the primary sort of rhythm that we saw. Um, and then LVMH was in it. I moved to Italy for a year. I finished my MBA there, and I had already done an internship at Coach. So my thought was, if I'm going to work at any luxury company, I moved to Milan to be part of the luxury world. I'm going to work at LVMH, and I found a way into the perfumes and cosmetics division in Milan and worked for the CFO there. So I learned about the accounting principles and the finance and the financial management of these different brands. Again, giving another side to why customers were buying. And the questions I asked there are very similar to the questions I've asked everywhere I've been, which is, why are people buying this stuff? Do
Mhm.
we have any more data about what they're doing? Do you have like information as to why people are entering these stores? And this, I got the same answer regardless of where I was, which is like, no, don't ask so many questions.
But that's crazy, right? Well, I mean, it makes sense from a timing standpoint. We're talking 2007, 2008, but like when you're producing massive goods that the everyday consumer can afford, and then obviously once you get to the luxury, like
Yeah.
it, you would think it's like in today's universe, and I'm sure today they do have it, but in today's world, it's like, yeah, that's data at hand. Like we make X amount of scarves. The people that produce those scarves or purchase those scarves, of those 1% will
Yeah.
make a purchase of a Coach handbag.
Yeah.
So then how do we offset the cost? So very simple in my very simple ad mind, like that
Yeah.
just makes sense, right?
It makes sense to us now, but that fragmentation that we continue to see today was even more real back then, right? So I think the fact of the matter is that like there are multiple systems involved in purchases and in in consumer just like understanding who's entering the store, who's exiting the store.
Mhm.
Then they're different by country, they're different by product. So there's just so much fragmentation in even understanding how a single product is bought and sold.
Yeah, because in today's world, if you don't have that data, it's like we're not going to produce anything until we understand that break even point. Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, well, probably in that world. Yeah, for sure. Side note, have you been to I was in Cannes this past year and I went to the LVMH house. They just bought a villa for 50 million and then put like another 20, 40 million into it. Evidently it's like their showcase house where they'll do photo shoots, but this place is legit. For the
Oh,
record, for everyone listening, I didn't stay there. I did this pop-up, spoke up at one of the breakout events. But yeah, I was like,
that's
wow, this company has some cash for
that
sure.
is cool.
Yeah. So after your time in Milan, you come back to New York.
Mhm.
You then find yourself back at Coach for a year and a half ish, and the retail planning manager. What? So you're obviously in love with the brand. You're in love with high luxury, high fashion. What was the shift over to the planning manager side of what you did?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a continuation of the same type of job that I had during my internship. It was planning and buying for the outlets, and it was really everything except for the handbags and the wallets. So anything you can wear, anything you can touch, put on your body was something that I had planned for. And the interesting thing was that at that point in time, we would have information from a year prior, and we would use that to plan what we should produce for the next year. So there's a 2-year gap now in terms of how the planning is done. And I found that to be really interesting considering that we're now coming into this age of digital, and we should have better data at our fingertips. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me as to why we were planning in that way. I also thought maybe there should be a software to do my job, but you know, I didn't know. I was using the spreadsheet that somebody handed me. So I think from there, that's why I was like, okay, what do I do with this, and how could it be better? And really, the missing piece for me was the data.
So and that had to have been frustrating for you, right? Because you're like in your mind, you're like, guys, this is so simple. We just need the data. And again, like you'd said, like they're like, hey, just keep doing your job.
Yeah,
But you then make a massive switch because then you finally realize like, okay, there are data companies out there. So walk us through the shift, how interesting that was from you to go to the retail space and to into the media space
yeah,
and what that transition was like. But again, I'm still fascinated by your intuition just to think of data as an actual thing the way today, most people listening to this podcast are going to be like, why are y'all talking about data? Like that's the obvious.
yeah,
But again, set the time frame. You're like, now you're in 2009, 2010,
yeah.
where it's starting to become accessible, but it doesn't look. But why do you think your mind thinks the way that it does? That's a very like psychological
It
question for you.
it was that like when you come up against roadblocks,
Mhm.
you got to question what's happening. You can't like things aren't meant to be that hard. And I couldn't comprehend why we were doing things the way we were doing, and I didn't understand why there was this gap. And to me, I fundamentally couldn't do my job properly knowing that there was this gap of information. And so I think I was surrounded by enough people that were like working at Google or Yahoo or that were in media. And I had that background and that history in media, and I knew digital was a thing and was happening around me. I just didn't understand how to connect those dots. And so I said, okay, I need to go and like figure out how this data thing works and how where it comes from and how it can be accessed. And so I ended up going to an ad tech startup in New York that was primarily focused on the travel space. So they needed someone to come in and help talk to the customers, which that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to understand why customers were buying things, but in this case, it's why are they buying advertising? What do they want to get out of the advertising? So moving from a B2C focused world into more of a B2B and understanding how that process ultimately did impact a customer on the other side. And so, yeah, I think really it's that questioning of like, this isn't working for me. What isn't working? Why isn't it working? And how can I go fix that for myself? Because no one's going to tell me to go do this. And by the way, no one's journey looks like mine or yours, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
we have to take that responsibility and figure it out for ourselves because we are motivated in different ways.
Yeah, and while we were prepping for the podcast a couple of days ago, that's what we talked about. I was so intrigued by your journey because a lot of people, and maybe give our listeners kind of like that inspiration, because I feel like so many people, they get frustrated in their careers and they're like, God, if I can only have this. And then here you were, intuitive enough to say like, hey, well, I know Google has this data. I know this company has this
Yeah.
data. Let me go find it. What kind of inspiration would you give people? Like, don't either go to the next place where your passion is and where the information, what you're looking for, but also what inspiration would you give people like, hey, destroy the room and let's figure out like where the treasure is.
Yeah. And I think it's almost maybe it's a little like softer than that, which is we're taught a lot to go out and do, but part of doing, the part where you grow, is where you stop and reflect. So I think it was reflection points that allowed me to do that. And I was thoughtful enough to stop and say, okay, what is bothering me here, right? So it wasn't so much. It's equal parts. What did I enjoy? What am I enjoying? And what's not working? Because if I'm going to a job and I don't feel great, or I feel like I'm coming up against a barrier in some way, there's a reason for that, and it's fundamentally not aligning with who I am, right? So I would inspire others or encourage others to stop and reflect because that's as much a meaningful part of the productivity process as doing.
Yeah.
You need to stop and understand yourself. And that goes through everything from taking a job because you know your values to like what kind of a job you want to do because you understand your skill set. Like you have to know yourself from top to bottom to feel good in what you're doing.
I love that. And one of the phrases that I've been saying on repeat lately, especially, we work for a company that Lamar is 100 and almost 29 years old, and we've seen massive evolutions externally and internally. But one of the phrases that always pops in my head is like, culture will eat innovation every single day if you allow it. And here you are, as I'm reading through your career, you were in some like 100-year-old, 50-year-old plus companies that
Mhm.
culture, hey, just look, we're fine. Look at our shares, look how we're performing. But again, I love your statement that you just made because it truly is like what fulfills you as a human, and then also what skill sets do you bring? And if eventually the company boss person in front of you or just the whole company itself isn't evolving at the pace that you want, then go out and self-reflect and find
Yes.
it somewhere else.
I mean, there's so many people that are miserable in their jobs.
Mhm.
And at some point, it's no longer about getting coached through
Yeah.
how to manage it and more about like taking that accountability and the responsibility on yourself and saying, why am I not happy? Because
Mhm.
it's nobody else's job to make you happy,
Right.
right? That's on you. And I think a lot of people have found it really easy to point the finger outside of themselves, and it's really down to what makes me happy, and I have to go figure out how to find that. And creating a network around you of people you feel safe enough to go ask for help.
Yeah. So you then pivot real big and you go to one of the larger advertising marketing data companies within DataXu in 2014.
Mhm.
Huge client of ours, worked a lot with DataXu in the past. That role was, would you say that was a huge stepping stone into your career on where you are today?
Yeah, I would say that, in our careers, we have a company that really transforms our view of the world and of ourselves and what it is that we can do. And for me, that was DataZoo. And, I saw these signs of, from digital, it went into programmatic. And as soon as I saw programmatic becoming a thing, I really wanted to be part of it because in my mind, it was actually creating a solution for this huge problem that we had, which was
Mhm.
there's a ton of waste in advertising. You know, way back when it's everyone pays $7 for, per impression, and it's, your CPM is fixed regardless of who's coming to your site or your channel or whatever it is. You pay the same amount for everyone, and it could or could not be the person you want to talk to. And so programmatic was a solution for that, in that it started helping us to understand what is the actual value for every single one of these people visiting my site. And that to me was mind blowing. So, that was like AI is now, right? It was like it changed the way we actually did bought and sold advertising. And so I wanted to go there, and sure enough, I found a really great spot for myself. I started within the go to market organization, helping the sales teams to really understand the customers and the brands. How do we sell what we have? How do we package up what we're doing? Moving more into real hardcore product marketing as we started to talk about identity and what graphs were, and what our graph of graphs look like, and eventually going from there to building a small sales team within the organization, hitting on demand gen and all the different aspects of marketing. So, really learning and creating a foundation around what is marketing, what is go to market within an ad tech company, and how does that motion, what are the teams involved in those motions? How do you make it work? And how do you sell these products that are fundamentally software to media buyers? So it's an interesting mix then of all of the kind of things that I had done, which was bringing together brand and advertising, and now adding a layer of tech, but really helping buyers to get value out of what they were buying.
For a moment, did you take a step back and you say, damn, we used to like have fax machines that would close sales for us. And here we are bidding within
Correct.
milliseconds, 18 milliseconds bid to buy. Yeah,
It's
that's
wild.
amazing. Yeah, and that's the world that we live in. And specifically, I spend the majority of my time so introducing out of home into the programmatic ecosystem. It's been about 13 years ago, but it was very early days and it was a lot of fun. So my question for you, because DataXu was one of our first DSPs that we would connect in with, and it was fun because we were still learning in the out of home space. Like, how do we fit here? Like, obviously, bidding, buying within real time within mobile ads, obviously where it's evolved today with CTV, online, mobile, and social. But for out of home, it took us a bit to kind of learn a lot, like do's and don'ts, what we don't want to do, because obviously in the online universe, there was no scarcity. It was like infinity space,
Yeah.
where in our universe, we're talking like very, very scarce number of screens in the grand scheme of the digital ecosystem. So for you, again, this is the very early days of programmatic as well.
Yeah.
So you're fulfilling all sorts of like excitement that you've missed out over the years. But for you, what was that like building something, but also having to spend a lot of time, I'm assuming, educating buyers and brands on like, why this is important?
Yeah, it was really satisfying. I mean, I'm sure you feel this having been at Lamar for as many years as you have, like to go through these like pivotal moments of transition and to be part of building something. Like to say you were part of building this dynamic ecosystem, you asked questions. You wanted people to get the education that they didn't have. And so I spent a lot of time educating internally, externally. I sat on different committees in the industry to explain what data was, what's the difference between first, second, third party data, what is identity, how does that form a graph, what does it mean, and it was really really interesting to see this evolution of the people who were involved in sort of that building phase between, let's say, 2012 and 2018, like that time frame.
Mhm.
Those people have a different DNA. Like they've fundamentally helped to like bring this to life. And after that point, it was adopted as the normal way of doing things. It was a standard. So anyone who sort of entered the space after that didn't ask as many questions. They didn't necessarily, try as hard to, create new solutions. It was more, okay, this is just the way it is.
The
And
way,
so
yeah.
there was this like deep satisfaction in like actually knowing that I helped to build something. Um, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I love that. That's yeah. I feel like you and I, before we started recording, we're like we're going to be best friends and hang out in NOLA. But it really is because do you ever find yourself also saying like you guys, you kids have no idea how hard it used to be to like actually make a transaction, but the the satisfaction is also that constantly evolving and changing and pushing and not being like okay, like all right, I know there's more we can squeeze out of this. And
Yeah.
so for you, I want to kind of jump forward to your career because I want to talk about your quick transition over to being a co-founder of this company that you're at now. But so you leave DataXu and then you have a couple of Owner IQ, which is purchased by Enmar. You spent some time at Ericsson, but then for the last 2.5 years, where was that jump? And I don't want to miss anything because that's obviously two massive companies that you work for. But
Yeah.
where was that jump where it was like, let me get more experience? Obviously, an acquisition happened, and then with Ericsson, what was that next 3.5 years, 4 years after leaving DataXu?
Yeah. So I would say that like after that, it was, where is the industry going now? And I took my bet on data. So second party data and the connection point between brands and retailers and the ability to share that back and forth. I think we were a little early at that point, but now you are well aware that retail media is continuing to grow and is a big part of digital and programmatic today. But at that point, it was really about enabling brands and retailers to share data amongst themselves to reach the same consumer with different messages. And so from there, I ended up going to another data backed company. So it was a telco. So Emoto was owned by Ericsson, telco data. And so the idea there was that we had both buy and sell side. We ended up building out native capabilities for our exchange. And then, there were some changes. I was laid off. And that's when I met up with a few others from the company where we had built out native and decided that, hey, why don't we go and figure out how to do this more extensively and make a solution that can solve for the problem of native. And so native, so Advertible was born in 2023. And the concept there is that not all supply side platforms have built out or developed the ability to render native ads. And so native ads fundamentally will match the look and feel of the publisher that they are rendered on. And the reason it's difficult is because it's not a single standard type of format. You have engineers from both front end, back end, you need app developers, you need a slew of different experts to help make this one format work. And so beyond that, there are different variables involved in the ad itself. So the ad is built out of components, meaning that there are things like an image, a headline, a caption, and some buyers may not have all of the assets available. So now you're going from you have a container that can be, a 300 by 250, or it could be a custom size, and you might have one asset, two assets, or 13. So how do you make an ad that's flexible enough to render in whatever size space you have, with whatever number of assets you have, and make it look like the publisher that it's going to land on? So all of these different variables together pose a really interesting problem, but can be solved with technology. And so that's what we really focused our efforts on, was solving a single problem and doing it in a way that was really easy for SSPs to implement. And so it's a plug-in solution. It solves this specific problem, but can solve for other problems like CTV. It can enable retail media to have a really interesting custom look and feel offsite to match the on-site. It can solve for social media, taking assets outside of a walled garden and ensuring that they look the same on the open web. So it's a really interesting format in that it is built on all of these different components. And ultimately, with AI being the next generation of what we're experiencing in advertising, having all of those variables at our fingertips are the data pieces that are going to feed those algorithms and are going to feed the AI to enable better performing ads, to make them look and feel better, and to actually ultimately make advertising better for the publisher, the advertiser, and the consumer.
Yeah, and it's so key because native's been around for a bit, but not a lot of folks understand the importance, right? Because you and I, we live in the ad world, we live in the tech world, but so often we forget about just the everyday consumer that's just maybe they're on Vanity Fair and they're reading an article, and all of a sudden their experience is disrupted by this doesn't
Jarring
happen in Vanity
ad.
Fair. Yeah, just awful ad. And it's like, whoa, what is it? So it's so what I love about native advertising is, and I'd love for you to expand on it more, is the brand itself, the publisher in this example, has to protect its integrity. Like there's a lot of work goes into the magazine, equal amount of work goes into the online experience. So allowing advertisers to come in and just have this like, wait, it's equally as important that also it seamlessly fits into the ad itself. Again,
Mhm.
going back to your early days of your career, like, hey, we're going to create this like moms of summer for gardening. Like
Exactly.
it's the same concept, except
Exactly the
for,
same.
yeah. So like authenticity becomes the biggest things for both the publisher side and the brand to make sure that the user feels like it's just like
Yeah.
the word
And and
natively.
we're simply the technology that enables that to happen. And I think that's the cool part is like we're allowing these two sides that may have not seen eye to eye
Mhm.
through this format to actually have agreement on what that can and should be. And I think another interesting thing that folks don't understand about native is that in traditional programmatic, the ads are hosted, the creatives are hosted by the demand side. And so they have tested, they have validated, they've verified what the ad looks like. In native, the ad is rendered by the SSP. So that means that the rendering, the putting together of those assets to create something cohesive happens in a fundamentally different way than it does with regular banners. And so the ability to also be able to like showcase what those ads look like in the end is a problem that's existed and one that we've fundamentally solved for as well.
Yeah. I love whenever because I always, it's my ADD, but I always like to just explore on the side while I'm talking to our guests. But it's funny because you ask like, "Hey, tell me more about native advertising,"
Yeah.
and I love this because it's like you're probably like, "Yeah, we're doing our job great," but it's like the most controversial thing about native advertising is the consumer feels like it's part of the actual content, and you're like, "Yeah, like that's the purpose of that."
Yeah.
Where do you so measurements become a massive side of our universe in the ad space and how ads are performing. Talk to our listeners a little bit on how you guys are using real-time measurement and how ads are performing here in native ads specifically are performing in real time, and how are you able to then render different advertising based on how that campaign or that campaign itself is performing within a publisher's site.
Yeah. So measurement is done through. So we're just an infrastructure play again. So we're going to pass all of the trackers through on behalf of our SSPs,
Mhm.
and so all of the tracking is still done the way it would have naturally been done. But what we're able to see and what we have seen is that with native specifically, the engagement is much higher. So we've seen increases in, let's say, click through rates of 50%. And then on the publisher side, we've seen increases in revenue for those publishers between, let's say, 5 and 40%. So an average of 20% increase in revenue just by utilizing native instead of just banner.
Yeah, I love that. And it's for the ad world on the SSP side, it's pivotal that those advertising responses happen creatively. But more importantly, for you guys as native as a service and as a platform to be able to render those, hey, these are the adjustments that the brand's making, and to be able to adjust those in real time based on articles, based on publishers is becomes even more important and creates less of a strain on the brand on the number of assets that they have to provide.
Yeah, and I think another thing I think I didn't touch on on the adjustment part, but the most of our customers haven't even been rendering native to date. So I think the first step is just getting them enabled with native. The next step would be then understanding how are all of the different pieces of the ad performing, because they are independent assets. Every single one can be tracked and measured, right? So understanding if the logo needs to go here or here, or people clicking in other places. So ultimately gathering that information and feeding it back into our AI to help redesign the layouts, or we can A/B test colors, or help to understand based on the KPIs of the campaign, is this a branding look and feel? Should we have something? Should we add animation? Should there be a special effect? What are the other things we can do? And those are more down the line because we haven't quite gotten there. But, we know that those are fundamentals that can and will change how the advertising will work and perform for our SSPs and advertisers.
Yeah, which is so massive. And I won't name a few of the brands, but one of my friends is a co-founder of a just call it a CPG brand, and that's his biggest fear is that his ads become stale and they're not fitting the right content at the right time,
Yeah.
but also is he using the right coloring? So he spends so much time on like different ad A/B test model when the reality of it is it's like, how do you interact with a company like this and connect it to an SSP, and then making sure you're bidding and buying not only on the right audience, but it looks and feels the same, and it's also the best creative and the best colors that perform the best.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much room, and there's so much that can happen, and I think that ultimately it's going to up level the full ad experience, whether that is for the advertiser or for the consumer in the end.
Yeah. So as your company, very early days of your company as well, as you're now, like you'd mentioned, like AI has become a massive part, especially in your universe. Where do you see the best opportunities for the growth for your company, Advertible, with utilizing AI technology beyond just like the bidding and the SSP side of it? But where else do you see there's a lot more efficiencies and ability for your company to like truly take off?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot happening within, there's the formats we can think about. So,
Mhm.
like, ensuring that brands are getting a full funnel experience. So, taking it from CTV at the top all the way down to performance based advertising, and having optionality within that entire cycle to hit on the KPIs that are necessary for the brand at every single touch point for their consumers. That's like just a fundamental shift that can happen. I think there's a interesting interaction that's going to continue to happen with the agents, and ensuring that, you know does this become a new channel for advertising as well? How do we interact with the chat GPTs of the world to ensure that as consumers are switching their behavior in terms of search, and content consumption, how can we ensure that we are part of that? And is it bringing the consumption behaviors from the sites into the chat areas? Things like that. I think those are going to continue to evolve in the spaces where advertising is enabled, are going to continue to grow, but making them less intrusive is going to continue to be the norm. And I think native is perfectly positioned for that.
Yeah. And it's almost like you've been through this your entire career to get to this moment in time, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So tell us last couple of minutes here as we wrap up. Outside of the boardroom, what is a lot of time that is spent for you? I know you have a grassroots community that you empower, helping South Asian, which I laugh more because my friend, he was also accused when he was a super young Indian guy, that he was Italian, and he was like not even close. But so you spend a lot of time helping South Asian professionals in the ad tech community. Tell us a little bit more about that and the importance of being seen. Also, we didn't even discuss, but you being a woman co-founder, the the powerful side of that. Like, give our listeners a little bit more about where your passion is outside of your day-to-day job.
Yeah. So, I think stepping into a role that maybe I don't look like a lot of the folks around me, I realized very quickly that it's not really about me at all. I have a platform, and that platform should be used to encourage others to say, hey, if she can do it, I can do it too. And so the ability to open those doors for other South Asians. So realizing there weren't a lot of Desis, that's our word for South Asian, um, in sort of business facing roles within ad tech, a few of us got together and decided, hey, why don't we start something, and we'll start with just networking. So we created a group called They See Us. It's meant to sound like they see us because
Ah,
we
okay.
want to be seen. And so it started really as a WhatsApp group, and has evolved into, we have over 100 professionals now across ad tech, and we have match made and have folks that have gotten jobs through this group. We are trying to now formalize it a little bit more. So we're working on our website, theyseeus.org, and we'll be working on having mentorship programs, job boards, more programs. Right now, we have groups primarily that meet in New York, but we have obviously folks around the country and across the world. So we try to meet in places like Cannes, at Possible, and get the groups together as much as we can. But really, the goal here is to open doors for others and to give them the confidence that they don't have to hide. They can be seen, and they should be seen, because everyone's bringing unique talent to the room. So that's the ACS side. And then on the other side of it is, I think we're really going through this interesting evolution in ad tech right now where we are hearing a lot more female voices, and I'm really proud to be part of these groups that are elevating the opportunities for women in the space. Advanced Women, the Women in Programmatic Network, those are two that I am actively participating in and have close relationships with a lot of the organizers. And I think it's really exciting to see that we can come together and help each other to elevate our voices, and that I think has been something that's been intimidating up until now. And so now it just doesn't seem as scary. And I think that's the goal, that folks like me and others can pave the way so others can step up and say, I want more responsibility, or I want to take on that role, or this environment doesn't fit me anymore. And I have the courage to step out of it. And I have a network to lean on to find what I should be doing and what I can be doing. And so, like, helping a lot of people through those transitions is what I spend time on, honestly. Helping folks look for new jobs, connect their networks, and really help prep them and understand what else is out there that they can be leveraging as their next step.
Yeah. And having two daughters, I love that because it's also taboo. It's just kind of like, okay, well, if you're a female in the ad tech, you have to look at and behave this way.
Yeah.
And I think I told you this respectfully as well, but as I was going through like the top 40, I was like, yes, like you would, if you look at someone like yourself, the way that you position yourself, it's like, oh, she probably works in fashion. And it's like, no, actually she's a boss bitch in the ad tech space and she's dominating. I forgot to mention you were top women in media and ad tech by Ad Monster and Ad Exchanger. Like, so what I love about this is you've found your way. You've
Yes.
surrounded yourself with the right people. I always like to do this. I'm like psyops in your life early on, but just like before you went off for college and high school, you surrounded yourself with the right people. So now what we talk about a lot at Lamar, it's like, you know, 6 generations, 4 generations. It's like each one teach one, like lift the next person up.
Yes.
And whether they look like you or not, or the way that they behave, it's kind of like find their passion, find their purpose. And most importantly, what I've taken away from this podcast is you've truly given the confidence for people that maybe look like you or don't look like you to like say, hey, you can have multiple shifts in your career and become highly successful. But more importantly, my takeaway for you is that you've are now in a position barely knowing you that you were like super excited. Like I knew I would find this gold somewhere and here it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's been great.
Yeah. I
I,
love
I
this.
I'm so, I mean, I honestly, I look at my niece and I just think, like, future is so bright for you.
That's huge. Well, hopefully that was the takeaway for a lot of our listeners, but also your journey. for others just to understand, like, data was that thing that you were looking for the entire time. You finally found it, but then now we're on this new adventure. So, I always say, like, never stop innovating, never stop changing, never stop challenging where you are and what you do, and great things are going to come.
Yes.
Unless you just like being boring.
There's plenty of those out there too.
Plenty of those out there. Well, thank you, my friend. This has been so much fun, and it's been great getting to know you, and would love to have you down here in New Orleans. But as
Yeah.
I reminded you, we'll wait till like the fall and the winter. Otherwise, you'll just straight up melt out here.
Yeah. It's hot out here in New York too. So I'll
Yeah,
wait.
I love it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you.